we've went ahead and already removed our water pump. Our next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our primary drive gear. One thing I want you guys to notice, you notice how we haven't touched the top end yet? Now from your previous classes, why is it a benefit to leave the cylinder on? Think of your Harleys. Why is it a benefit to leave the cylinder on?
Where the rod's not moving around.
So that rod's not sitting and banging across the engine as we take this apart. Now this primary drive gear here just uses a snap ring. A lot of these are torqued on. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to move this into a better position for me. I'm going to walk it over here. Now, if this were a nut, okay, let's say this were a nut and bolt. What is something, right now, this clutch basket being bolted on here actually aids us in holding the crankshaft. So if I got my impact on here and wanted to impact this off, if I didn't have my clutch on here, I don't have as much drag. Does that make sense? So do you see where it's a real benefit to go ahead and leave the clutch basket on first? If you just always take off the most obvious stuff and take the bigger stuff off first, it's going to end up giving you problems later on. But there's a couple other tools that I'm going to show you right now that really help in doing this. First off, we have a tool called a gear jammer. Okay, this is awesome. This is Motion Pro. It's even got a little magnet on it. And what you do is you take and jam this between two gears. Can you guys see this? Hello?
Oh.
So what this is since these gears are jammed, it will now hold this so that I could get my impact, or not my impact, my hand tools, I'm sorry, and I could go ahead and take that nut off. If I had the clutch basket gone, I don't have anything for the gear jammer to go against. Does that make sense? You can use this on anything where you have two gears together. This will lock the two gears together so that you can remove whatever lock nuts or bolts that are on there. Does that make sense? Pretty cool and it's real cheap. I'm going to show you, if you don't have one of these, this is pretty new on the market too in the last few years to my knowledge. But before that, I'm going to show you what everybody's used. Who has a penny? Fresh out. It's got to be a penny. Can't be a quarter. It's got to be a penny.
Cowboy's got one.
Thanks. Here's the oldest trick in the book. I'm going to go ahead and flip this up. One of the oldest tricks in the book is I go ahead and take a penny between two gears and rotate this around till it locks into place. The penny itself will jam in between the two gears and create a lock. Now, this penny's a lot softer than the gears, so it's going to be able to shred in there, lock in place, and then you'll be able to remove your bolts. Pretty cool?
Matt, can I see how you put that in there?
You're gonna damage your penny. It's gonna cost you 1 cent. It's gonna cost you. This is softer than the gear, so it doesn't hurt anything at all. This is one of the coolest tricks out there. The only thing you gotta be careful of is that this penny, if it does shear or break and it goes down in. Guys will use pennies to also tighten it, to tighten the two gears. Make sense? If I jam this between these two gears and I rotate this around, I'm gonna be able to also use that as a holder to torque the bolts. Does that make sense? Alright, cool. I won't steal your money, so I don't remember who gave that to me. Here you go, there's your penny back. Another specialty tool. I'm going to get this back up. Okay, move side cutters, water pump, primary drive gear. It says, why would you loosen the bolt to this gear before actually removing the basket? That's what I'm saying. I want to loosen this bolt, if there is one, before taking the basket off, just to make life easier. Everybody correct? Everybody get what to put on your lab sheet? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start to remove the clutch now. I'm going to switch to a 10 millimeter. Now, here's something you have to know. This is a star pattern. If you remove one of these at a time, you're going to break the clutch basket. You 100% will probably, break the inner hub. What there is springs under here, and they all equal at tension. Would you agree with me that I have 5 springs here? So if I divide 100% by 5, it equals 20%. That means that each one of these springs is accountable for 20% of compressing the clutch pack. Okay? If I just take one off, that drops it to 80%. That's a lot of load on that boss. It's probably going to break it. At a minimum, you'll strip the bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crack these loose in a star pattern, and then I could slowly start to back these off. I'll use my electric drill here. Excuse me. watch what I do. You guys got to catch this. If I see anybody just zapping these out, you're going to be in trouble. I'm just going to lightly, you see what I'm doing? And do you see how I'm kind of just bringing them up all about the same height? Does that make sense? If I do one too far, I will break this basket. One of my best students ever, it was funny, he finally says to me, he says, Dane, I finally broke the clutch basket. He goes, I just wasn't thinking, I just bashed them all out. It was on a 2009 YZF 250F. That inner basket, excuse me, I should call it properly, the inner hub, it was like $140. So, not cheap. What's that? Yeah, over something he knew better what not to do. That was the worst part about it. Get some more baggies here. Once you're up like this, I'm hardly doing anything, and there's no spring tension. So we're going to talk in the future, when we do our 4-strokes, we're going to talk about how to measure these springs and what to look for and everything else. Right now, you're just getting exposure to what they are. Wait till you break one of these off in the inner hub because you over-torque it. That's a fun day. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pop just my outer plate off for right now. Okay? Now what I have here is I have a bearing surface. This is that lifter that I talked about. You got to understand, this thing sits and spins, right? This spins on here, so there's a bearing underneath it. And you're going to see it's a real small needle bearing. I'll set it on the bench. You guys can come take a look at later. The other thing about the outer pressure plate is this also acts as your last steel plate, so this is very important on this surface on here. This has a lot of function other than just holding the clutch together. The clutch pack, I got a couple choices here. I could take and lift this whole pack out right now and set it on the bench. There's a lot to think about on these clutches. We have steels and fibers. Yep, let me get to that. So I have a lot of different things that we're going to discuss in more detail over time. But these tabs here, sometimes the very last plate will be offset by one tooth. Okay? And you'll notice a different notch in the basket. This one, they're all consistent and they all stay the same. When we take our 4-strokes apart, you're going to see quite often the very outside plate is moved over one. The one thing about steels that I'll tell you about right now, and when you take this apart, your best bet is when I pull these out, I'm going to take them out, I'm either going to pull the whole pack out or I'm going to set them one at a time and I'm going to flip them over. Does that make sense? I take them out and I flip them over because then I'll be able to look at the whole pack as it was installed. The one thing that you need to know is that these steels, they can go in either direction. But once again, let's talk about how they're made. They take a great big sheet and they take a die that goes over and punches these steel plates out. So we have one edge that has a rounded side and one edge that's really flat. Does that make sense? Every manufacturer out there simply agrees on one thing. You either put all rounded edges in or you put all flats in. Does that make sense? Just the way I've been doing it for a million years, I've seen a lot of manufacturers do it this way, taking apart clutches brand new out of motorcycles. I've always noticed that the flat side is in. Okay, does that make sense? But there's no rhyme or reason. It'll work in either direction. If you put one flat in and one rounded in and one flat in, the realistic deal is it's probably going to work fine. But the problem is you're giving up real estate. Does that make sense? When I don't have as much of an even pack on there and I flip them back and forth, I'm giving up some of that little bit of support that's there. Does that make sense? So you can put on yours if you want to copy me that you're going to put all flats in, but either way they definitely need to be the same. Now before I pull this clutch out, here's my clutch push rod. This is usually not directional, but don't you think it's a good idea to put it back in the same direction? I'm going to look to see if there's any markings or indication on here. I don't see anything, but what I'm going to do is since I install it from this way, I'm just going to draw a little arrow. Does that make sense? This is way overkill. I mean, way overkill. But when we build good habits, do we do that in other areas too? So I'm going to go ahead and just set that off to the side here. Now my clutch hub nut, my two choices are, I can use, and I will show you both ways, I can use my vice grip pliers that we talked about before, or what I like to do is I like to leave the pack in place, and I'm going to get a big impact. Sneak in here. Get this all the way over. Bigger yet. Okay, I'm finding 30 millimeter. adapter yet.
Not even close.
Hopefully I'll be able to pop this off with this 3/8. Got it all, okay? That's the way I like to do it. Now if I would have taken that pack out, let's see what would have happened. Just going to pull the whole pack out, and I would go ahead and grab my last steel back, and I'm going to reset this in the same direction that it was removed. Does that make sense? Okay, if I would have taken and done this without the clutch pack in there, see how this is independent? So it gives me that extra friction. If I want to do it per the service manual is going to tell me to take my vice grip tool, a little wider yet. I'm going to grab onto a couple teeth here. More tension. Less tension. Okay, now I can hold on to that basket. I would have to go to hand tools. Why would I not want to use an impact?
You don't want to beat up the clutch basket with.
This inner hub here, if I used an impact on this, since that's a hammering effect, it's going to put little grooves in this basket, could cause your clutch plates to stick. I don't really care for this tool at all either way, because since I'm clamping into this groove, this tool's made out of what? What's the basket? Aluminum. Okay, I'm not a big fan of it. The only thing is you have to use this tool on assembly. There's no other choice about it, okay? So notice, did I put a lot of tension on this vice grip? I didn't. I just put a minimal amount. I just want to be able to hold it so it can't rotate, and I'm going to go ahead and be able to remove that faster. Pretty cool? So there's another specialty tool. Now as I take this basket out, there's a couple things I want to make a deal about. The first thing I notice on this model, you got to remember, we're only talking about this model, but everything's going to be pretty similar. There's a washer that went under my nut. This nut on this Kawasaki doesn't have a locking retainer or whatnot on it, but if you could see this, we'll see if we can see it in the video, we'll pass it around. Do you see those dimples? Okay? So that's actually smashed in. This is the nut brand new. This is a one-time use too. When you install this, it's dimpled in, which is going to make those last couple of threads really hard to be able to remove. What do you bet you're going to use on this nut? Loctite. So does that mean the shaft's going to have to be good and clean? On the top side, see the dimples? Okay. So that's a lock nut, if you will. Guys, here's the whole key to clutches right now in assembly. Every single inner basket and inner hub and outer basket between them is going to be some type of washer. Okay. If I don't have this washer, I want to put this back together, and I want to show you how this works. Just going to set that there. This spins free, right? Okay. You see that? Now I'm going to put pressure on here. Okay, just as if I tighten it down with a nut. I'll try and go this way for the camera. I could spin this completely free. Are you guys seeing that? You guys need to do this on every clutch you ever do, because if this washer were to fall, when you pull a clutch out on a bike, where the engine's in the bike, where's this washer typically fall? And what do you probably have right underneath this? An oil pan. It falls in the oil pan, you forget it's there. I want to show you what happens when this washer isn't here. It wants to stick on here, okay? You could end up dragging. This one isn't as bad as it normally will be. Normally it'll actually physically, can you hear that metal to metal? Because the basket was falling down with gravity here. Now, when I tighten this down, if I were to torque this, use the tool and torque that to probably 50 or 80 foot-pounds on that nut, there's a really good chance that's probably a specification it's going to be. Here's what's going to happen for you. You're going to fill this with oil. You're going to grab the clutch lever, and you're going to have the engine running. When you put it in gear, guess what happens? Bike's going to launch. Okay, you're physically, without this washer, you are physically locking the primary drive gear to the clutch basket. As soon as you put that in gear, that bike's going to launch. Are you with me on that? So you have to make sure and know that between an outer basket and an inner basket, every single model out there, that there is a bushing in here so that this doesn't drag. For me, using this in class over the last couple years, and taking the drag out, can you actually see where I've put grind marks on the back of the basket? Does that make sense? So you guys get a chance, you could take a look at this, and you'll see those grind marks. Those are not normal. I have created them from leaving the washer out and basically dragging this along there. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm not going to go over real deep into the inspection of this right now. As you guys get a chance to look at this, one thing you're going to know is a bunch of notches or steps in the clutch basket. Those are not good. This should be perfectly smooth. What's happening is, due to the vibration of acceleration, deceleration, as that clutch pack is moved back and forth, it's created these little grooves in here, and that would make the clutch real grabby. As you would try and pull the clutch in, those fibers have to basically jar themselves across those steps or those grooves, and that's not ideal at all. It isn't the worst one I've ever seen. I'll show you guys some other ones, but they're not the best. So why don't we go ahead and I'll just set this here. So there's our clutch. Last thing before we take this off is I have a needle bearing and a spacer that rides in the middle there. Pop that washer for me. Much as possible on the bench, try and set this stuff back together. Get one more. This goes underneath the bottom. Now what's something you could do if this was going to be long-term storage? I put a zip tie through there, call it a day, don't have to worry about it. So we're getting pretty close here. I'm going to go ahead and get my primary drive gear off. We'll look at your lab sheet. This one, like I said, is just a snap ring. This off. I'm inspecting this as I go to look to see if this seems to be directional. I don't see anything that looks to really give me any indication. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a paint mark on the outside of this. What's that going to tell me?
Faces you.
That it faces me. Now there's no timing on this gear. It's 100%. This is directly our PTO. We're coming out of the crankshaft and we're going to drive the clutch basket. So we can put that in another baggie. Okay. All right, we're looking pretty good.
What'd you call those little rings that popped out of the clutch? What'd you call those?
The springs,
Yeah.
they're in the baggie. These are clutch springs. You talking about this right
No,
here?
I'm talking about what he was just touching.
These here?
Yeah, what are those called?
This is the fibers and steels.
Fibers and steels.
Yep, this is made of steel. This is fiber. It's aluminum with it's impregnated with some type of fiber material, whether it's Kevlar, carbon fiber, asbestos, whatnot. This would be just like a brake pad material. Okay? Fibers and steels. Okay, let's keep looking here. Let's make sure I got all your questions answered here. On the clutch, describe how to remove those outer pressure plate springs in an even pattern, like a star pattern, like a quarter turn to half turn at a time. Let's see, if you removed one at a time, we talked about that. It ended up breaking the inner hub. What might you have to do before removing a clutch hub nut? We talked about this in the classroom. This one here doesn't use a staked fastener to hold that clutch hub nut in place, but if you guys had a washer that was on top of the nut holding it in place, you would have to unstake that. You would take your chisel and basically drive that tab down so that you could remove the clutch hub nut. What other tool? That's the vice grip looking tool, number 20 there, or 19. What tip was given to aid you removing the clutch hub nut with an impact? What was the tip given? No. We're leaving the clutch pack in place. Okay? So when we want to use our impact, we're going to use, guys, you need to do one thing. This tool right here, you should take, if you're going to buy this tool, take a big engraver and put never use an impact right on the tool. This tool is never for impact on removal or disassembly. Remember same thing with the sprocket, how he said that you need to use hand tools when you use this? Otherwise, we're going to dig either these teeth or jaws into that part and we're going to ruin it. We don't want to ruin the tool, and we don't want to ruin the part. You never, ever use an impact with this tool. Hand tool. Clutch, it's there's numerous names. We could look it up for Motion Pro. To tell you the truth, I think of this as the clutch hub holder tool, or it's a sprocket holder tool. Well, Ryan, go ahead, grab a catalog, and you can look up in the tool section one of these metric catalogs, and we can see what it's actually called.
Number 20, when you're talking about leaving the fibers and steels in.
Yes. Yep.
It's also called a clutch pack.
Clutch packs.
Let's go ahead and hit pause. Actually process that one.